Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire? You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
The Battle for Hue was among the longest and bloodiest battles of the war in Vietnam. Hue is also among the most significant urban battles in military history. The battle is legendary, but this fight was also at times strange, terrifying, and traumatizing.
I say this with all honesty, there's not a day in my life that goes by that I don't think of some incident or something that happened in the Battle of Hue.
RPG came in right behind my neck and knocked me into the street. I got a big scar right there in shrapnel. And knocked me into the street, and an AK opened up on me. I got a bullet here, and in the spine.
We thought we'd seen it all until we got to Hue City, and it's just the carnage and everything that you saw. You would watch bodies just deteriorate, just rot right there in front of your eyes day after day. And
they would leave the bodies in the street?
We saw one, I watched his body just decay. After about a week, it was just falling apart and stuff.
So you'd be out there on patrol and walk past that same body over and over again?
Yeah, absolutely.
He had just joined us, and he was a big strapping young man, over 6 feet tall, and he was anxious to get into combat, just chafing at the bit. And he runs up to get into combat, and he gets shot right square in the middle of his forehead, dead. That first firefight, that first round, that poor guy.
When anyone ever mentions Hue City, I remember the pop of the illumination rounds, the sizzling, the swinging, so the light wasn't exactly, it was shifting a little bit from each illumination round, and dogs fighting over a body.
Those men you just heard from there, they want to tell you a story about a battle, the battle that changed everything. This is our special series about the Battle for Hue and the war in Vietnam. Today, Chapter 3, Hue City Grunts. My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. I talked to one Marine Corps veteran a few weeks ago, one of about 20 veterans I've called, emailed, or interviewed, trying to learn everything I can about the Battle for Hue. I've thought about what that Marine told me several times. He said, "I'm not an expert on the battle, but I am an expert on the part of the battle I saw." Each veteran I've talked to has told me stories that I've only heard from that one person.
Hello, sir.
How you doing?
Sorry running late today.
That's okay.
A couple of months ago, I traveled to Western Kentucky to spend some time with Jim Hunter.
We were on these bridges on Highway 1.
He fought with the Hotel 25 Marines.
When the Tet Offensive started, they tried to overrun the bridges.
Most of the attacks that started the Tet Offensive happened in the early morning hours of January 31st, 1968. Some of those fights started earlier on the 30th.
So they hit Bridge 1 and 2, and we ran up to Bridge 2. I mean, it looked like the 4th of July.
Jim Hunter's experience on the first day of Tet is just one experience among a few 100,000. In late January of '68, there were more than 500,000 U.S. service members in Vietnam, half a planet away from home. In the early morning hours of that last day of January, thousands of NVA soldiers overran the city and flooded these red brick streets that surround a palace inside the walled city called the Citadel on the north side of Hue.
I think it shows two things, Mr. President. First, that they have more power than some credit them with.
The voice you heard there is Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense when the first U.S. Marines were ambushed along the road to Hue.
In Quezon, where we're going to have the real military engagement, I believe we'll deal them a heavy defeat.
This phone call was made on January 31st. The time of day is unknown. This is McNamara's assessment of the first day of the Tet Offensive.
I think in the other areas, it's largely a propaganda effort and a publicity effort.
Vietnam is 11 hours ahead of Washington, D.C., and it was about 11:40 a.m. in Vietnam when Alpha Company was ambushed going into Hue, about 12:40 a.m. in D.C. So, whenever the call happened, there were already dozens of Marines and Navy corpsmen either killed or wounded on the streets in and around Hue. Over the course of the call, Secretary McNamara talks about the attack on the embassy in Saigon and the attacks across the country, but he does not mention Hue. So at the time of the call, there's a lot Robert McNamara does not know. Still, this was McNamara's report to the president during the first day of Tet.
It's largely a propaganda effort and a publicity effort.
That is not how the men who survived this fight remember their first day in Hue.
All hell broke loose.
And they took a serious beating.
They're loading bodies onto a tank to try to get them out, and they're blown apart.
I remember dragging him in a courtyard, and I remember looking down, and his legs were gone.
Holy crap, we're going to die.
I'll never forget the noise. You can see people hollering at you. You can't hear what they're saying.
Knowing full well that if he went there, he probably wouldn't be coming back. And that's exactly what happened.
I couldn't get Doc Kirkham. I couldn't get to Lance Corporal Lucas.
I truly never expected to see my 19th birthday.
It would be difficult to comprehend the overwhelming violence of this moment unless you were there.
I've talked to the chiefs about some kind of a reciprocal action, retaliation for their attack on our embassy or in retaliation for their attack across the country. There just isn't anything they've come up with that is worth a damn.
The Pentagon and the White House did not understand what was happening in Hue at that point because no one in the chain of command understood. Right after they fought their way into the city, the officers on the ground tried to explain to their command at Task Force X-Ray that they were outnumbered and outgunned. Still, that command sent Golf Company into a firefight on the first afternoon where 5 of their men were killed and more than 40 more wounded. First Platoon took the lead as the company charged towards the Citadel. 2 Marines and a Navy corpsman were killed right outside the fortress trying to get inside.
And Captain Meadows made a decision that probably cost him a star. He probably would have retired as a general. But our orders was to go, if he'd had us try it, he'd lost that whole company.
The next morning, 1st Platoon was sent right back out again.
I've got no squad leader. I've got no fire team leader. Both of them, one's dead, one's wounded.
Day 2 at Hue, Thursday, February 1st.
We got no platoon sergeant. We got 1 corporal left, and that was Corporal Cobb.
And at this point, Richard Cobb had only been a corporal for a few hours. He was a lance corporal when the battle started. They pulled him aside when they got back to the compound after day 1.
I was told to take charge of 1st Squad, 1st Platoon. And shortly after that, I was told I'd been given a meritorious promotion to corporal.
And they tell us to go to the damn prison. That's 7 or 8 blocks up this way. You know how far we got? Barely across the street. And I'd like to know what idiot come up with that brilliant plan?
A day and a half of city fighting, and the problems are mounting. The North Vietnamese forces virtually controlled the entire city. The Marines were surrounded. Buildings were burning, the air was filled with smoke, and bodies were scattered in the streets.
The stench and the sickening stench of these smelling and rotting corpses throughout the city that we encountered everywhere we went.
Marines are expected to be ready to fight anyone, anywhere. But this situation, they were not ready for this.
We weren't prepared for Way City. We came straight out of the jungle, basically. And it was a whole new experience for us.
When the Marines arrived on day one, the U.S. forces who were already there held just 2 city blocks on the south end of Way, the MacV compound and a park just to the north that they turned into a landing zone. On day 2, they still only held those same 2 blocks south of the river. The Americans have lost dozens of people, either killed or wounded. They're clearly outnumbered. They've never fought in an urban environment before. Most have had no training on how to fight in a city. They learned how to fight this battle as they were fighting it.
As I understand it, very few, if any, of you guys had any kind of training on how to clear a room or a building.
No, zero. We didn't have any city type, conflict. So we were making it up as we went along, just trying to survive it.
The officers know the command in Phu Bai does not understand what they're seeing in Way. And even if they did understand, getting reinforcements into the city will not be easy. They'll have to fight their way in just like the first convoy did. That also means resupply missions are a challenge. When most of these Marines left Phu Bai for Way, they were told they'd only be gone for a few hours. Many were told to leave their packs behind. So they don't have essential gear, a dry pair of socks, poncho liner, rain gear, sea rations. And on top of all of that, they have specific rules of engagement for Way, unlike anything they had seen before.
So we weren't allowed to use artillery or air support.
The ancient city of Way is a religious, cultural, and educational center for Vietnam. The city has historic structures, including the Imperial Palace inside the walled city called the Citadel, north of the river. So the U.S. leaders in Vietnam decided if anyone was going to damage or destroy the buildings in Way, that would have to be the South Vietnamese forces.
There was a ban on using artillery and or air support because of the antiquity of the city, that the officers in their wisdom decided that they did not want to demolish or damage in the retaking of the city.
They didn't want to destroy it, but they were destroying us.
The Task Force X-Ray Command in Phu Bai may still not understand the nature of the battle at this point, but they are communicating. They've ordered the trucks used in the convoy on day 1 to be driven back to Phu Bai. So on the afternoon of February 1st, they sent those trucks, and they sent a messenger.
So we had to send one of our lieutenants back, Bill Rogers from 3rd Platoon, called a convoy and went back to Phu Bai to tell them what exactly was going on.
And that we needed immediate reinforcements.
Lieutenant Bill Rogers went to Phu Bai that day armed with a story, a first-hand account of all the fighting and the death he'd seen during the first day and a half of the battle. The convoy was also loaded with the evidence of the fight, severely wounded Marines and others in body bags.
So we did mount a couple of 6x, and we headed south out of the city, taking fire as we exited the city.
That's Larry Ortiz, machine gunner, Golf 25. There's a well-known photo of Larry from the battle. He's in the middle of his platoon. They're all behind a wall in a firefight. Larry is the only person in the picture who is standing. He's holding his M60 over the wall to return fire. Larry was on this mission to Task Force X-Ray Headquarters.
There was this relief that comes over you that we're safe. I didn't have to worry about where I was going to be in Hue City that night, where the enemy was, or going out on another night ambush or anything of that nature. So there was this feeling of boy, am I glad that I'm back here and not where I was.
And on the same day that convoy went to Fubai, more reinforcements were being sent from Fubai to Hue. Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines was part of that group fighting the NVA around the bridges south of Fubai. They were in the same fight as Jim Hunter and Hotel Company. Fox Company was pulled back from the bridges and helicoptered into Hue on February 1st.
They landed them in the park down there by the river, and they managed to get 2 platoons in, and I think it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. We'd been fighting them all morning long, and we couldn't go nowhere. And then Fox got there, and the same thing happened to them. And then that night, here comes another brilliant guy. They tell Fox Company to make a night move to go to the prison. Now, before you got to the prison, they had what they call the hospital complex. There was a couple of blocks. They were all in that hospital.
Before I made that trip to Kentucky, I talked to Jim Hunter on the phone. He told me a few stories about Hue.
You know, I was greener grass.
He also told me about his friend, Bob. Bob Meadows lives a couple towns over from Jim. Bob also fought with Hotel 25 at Hue.
He can tell it better than I can.
Jim told me Bob had a few stories I might want to hear.
August 31st is when we arrived at Paris Island, 1966.
And Jim was right.
Here's a picture of me and my dad sitting at the table drinking coffee the night before we went to Vietnam. We sat up all night, went around and looked at some of the shops. I just picked it up and walked out. I didn't pay for it. That's PFC Crum, it's wounded. This is Tommy Lee Walker to the left, right here. I can't remember this radio operator's name. These other Marines scattered down the wall.
Isn't that Doc Howie there?
Yeah, Doc Howie here.
On the 2nd of February, day 3 of the battle, Hotel 25 was in Fubai. They had also been pulled back from the fight at the bridges. And by now, more Marines from Alpha 11 were in Fubai as well. Those Alpha Company Marines started to see some of their buddies who had already been in the fight in Hue.
Some of the other guys that had been wounded, they brought them back.
This is when Larry Lewis started to understand what was happening.
They said Alpha Company's just been depleted, you know. He said there's a lot of them been killed and wounded, and he said there's not very many of them left.
Were you aware what Lieutenant Rogers was being sent to do at that time? Did you understand that at that point?
Had no idea whatsoever other than we were headed back to Fubai. And I thought from my lack of, getting any information as to what was going on, I thought we were going back just to pick up our backpacks that had been there, that we had left before we went into Hue City.
Whatever Lieutenant Bill Rogers said must have gotten through to the Task Force X-Ray Command, because now they were scrambling to put together another convoy to Hue. In those trucks, Hotel Company, along with a few Marines from Alpha and Gulf. Larry Ortiz, Jim Hunter, Bob Meadows, and Larry Lewis, they were all there.
February the 2nd.
It was frightening to know that we were going to be sent back to this hellhole of a battle that we were engaged in.
Leo Myers, 1st Platoon Lieutenant, he ordered me to take my squad and go over to the armory there in Fubai, pick up gas masks. And I said, gas masks? He said, Corporal Meadows, just take your squad and get some gas masks. You're going to go on a truck convoy. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, there's some NVA loose there in this Hue City up north here, and they want y'all to go up there and capture them. I said, y'all ain't got no MPs up there? He said, go get the gas mask. I said, yes, sir.
Bob Meadows fought in Vietnam 57 years ago, and you get the impression listening to him that this Marine just might remember everything.
They's bringing trucks, lining them up on the road there at Fubai. I'm sitting there, and I had a can of chili I'd been saving for a special occasion. I said, well, I'm going to eat this chili. I took my little old P-38 and opened that chili, and I was sitting there eating it cold. And here come Mr. Myers again. He said, saddle up. Nobody in the cab of the trucks, everybody in the back. So everybody's loading up. I got in the cab of the truck. I thought, nah, I'm going to ride in the cab. We had much more than left to Fubai perimeter going up Route 1, and we ran into a tank was burning on the side of the road. We broke into an area there. And I looked over, both ways, and there was a perfect line of NVA soldiers going toward Way. If you ladies don't mind, I said, shoot them, they're NVA.
We got outside of Way City.
As we moved on in, there was a big, huge fountain. I remember that fountain.
Everything was eerily quiet.
And we went to the right to go around the fountain.
And I was saying to myself, I said, this is not good. You know, we don't need there's something not right.
It hadn't gone maybe 200 feet, and boom, the truck in front of me blowed up.
The convoy was stopped.
All heck broke loose.
Everything broke loose.
There were periods of pure pandemonium.
Rockets, mortars.
Shooting from every which direction.
Anything they could throw at us.
So I ordered everybody to get out of the truck and get down low, was going to move up the street.
We had what they call a Connex box. Everybody jumped inside of it, you know, and you could hear the bullets were just bouncing off of it.
One of them twin 20s come up behind us and started shooting at the buildings. I said, Lord have mercy, let's get on the other side of the truck.
I just put my hand up like this and just started firing at us everywhere.
And as I stopped, there was a guy laying on the back of the truck was laying on him.
Alpha 1 Lieutenant Donald Perkins was thrown out of one of the trucks. He was the Marine Bob saw there pinned under a tire.
I guess 2 trucks in front of you was the truck that landed on Lieutenant Perkins.
Right, yeah. As we went by, I saw him under that truck, you know. But, you know, and I could, where you knew he was dead. And, you know, I wanted to get him out of there, you know, all of us did.
They were still shooting at us. And I'm thinking, where in the world are they all at? They got to be all over this place.
And I remember like it's a hail of gunfire.
I've never had that much firepower aimed at me in my life.
And I said, all right, guys, stay low. Make sure you got a clip in your weapon and your weapon's loaded.
There's some Army guy up there in the MACV compound. He was hollering out, hey, they've been dropping mortars in on that street. I thought, oh my God, you know, that shrapnel's just going to fly all over the place.
Mr. Myers hollered, Corporal Meadows, get your squad and go to the college. I turned around, I said, college? Where's the college at? He said, just go straight up this street, you'll run into it. So we took off.
I didn't go into Way University, went back to the MACV compound.
Made it back to the MACV compound.
As we were coming in, you could see people in the MACV compound that were just clapping and, you know, and I'm saying to myself, this is not good. If they're glad to see us, we're in trouble.
So as some go to the compound, Bob Meadows joins the fight to clear Way University. And that is where he spent that night. The fight continued the next day. Bob Meadows showed me a photo. In the picture, Bob is running on the roof of Way University, one hand holding his helmet on his head. He told me what happened next.
Powell and Smith. And they had shot an RPG, believe it or not, it hit the side of the college. And there was a little opening there, and that strap metal come in there and got both them boys. Got both of them. And was trying to get them down, and then I heard somebody hollering, ah! I looked over at my radio man, he was down. I run to get him, and I went down. And that's the last thing I remember. I woke up, I was in the hospital at the night.
Larry Lewis, Jim Hunter, and Bob Meadows all joined the fight in Way on January 2nd.
That was an adventure in itself, getting from off that truck into the city.
But as far as Larry Lewis remembers, he's never met Jim or Bob. In fact, Jim and Bob's Kentucky hometowns were only an hour's drive apart, and they fought in the same company. They were in the same place at the same time several times, yet they don't remember ever meeting before or during the war.
I was looking at the magazine rack, and there was a Vietnam combat magazine. It had Marines and Way or something.
This happened in the 80s.
I said, I know these guys.
He wrote a letter to the magazine, and later he got a call from someone from Hotel 25. And that person connected Jim with Bob. So after all of that and all that time, they finally met in the 80s in Kentucky. They've been close friends ever since.
Tell me how that is to have kind of those guys to lean on and that kind of thing. How important is that?
They're like my brothers, you know. I mean, I don't really worry about what I say or anything because I know I'm good.
I started this episode by telling you every veteran I spoke to for this series has told me stories that are unique to that one veteran. Jim Hunter and Bob Meadows' stories are good examples of that. But unique stories are not the whole story. There are many shared experiences, and one I've heard about over and over is the bond between these warriors both during the war and in the years since.
For me personally, every Marine wounded and every Marine that was killed, particularly if I knew them on a personal level, was like a knife through the heart. Every single time. How do you deal with that on a daily basis? And what do you do with those emotions? What do you do with those feelings?
The bond between Vietnam veterans has remained strong for all these years because in many ways, and at many times, each other is all they've had. That was true during the war, and although experiences vary, that's also been true after the war. They understood each other when they returned to a country that did not understand them, or what they had been through, and in many ways they returned to a country that never really tried to understand them.
No, I never was accosted, in the terminal or something like that and spit on, literally. But symbolically, we were all spit on.
You couldn't get a date. You couldn't get a job. I'm a Vietnam veteran. Yeah, it was that bad. I had people I went to high school with. Girls I went to wouldn't even talk to me when I came back from Vietnam. My sister, bless her heart, she's going to see this. I love you, Ellen. She belonged to a sorority at the university. Would she set her brother up with a date? Nope. You were just, man, you went to Vietnam. You were terrible.
When did that ease up at all?
It had.
Again, this was not everyone's experience. But if this was your experience, or if yours was nothing like this at all, the fact remains the relationships between Vietnam veterans has been different than any other relationship in these veterans' lives.
If you weren't in Vietnam, I wouldn't talk to you. I didn't trust you. And we really didn't talk about it.
I had a good friend. He shot himself several years ago. Eventually that war caught up to him. And I always, every time we'd get together, I would think about the men I lost. And he come to me and he said, Tent, he said, you realize how mad you making the rest of us? I said, what do you mean? He said, you take credit for every man you lost. He said, how about taking credit for some of us you brought back? And I never looked at it that way. But what he didn't understand, and none of them guys understand to this day, there's a few of them still left. Well, I don't think they understand. They got me back.
That Changed Everything is a special mini-series on the Battle for Hue and the war in Vietnam, and is part of our podcast, Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. Next time on The Battle That Changed Everything, one legendary Marine enters the fight.
What kind of fighting is it going to be?
Lieutenant Colonel Big Ernie Cheatham.
It's house to house and from room to room.
Plus, Alpha 11 loses a legend of their own.
Sergeant Gonzalez was running back and forth, and he was firing laws. They were rocket-propelled grenades.
I was in the second floor of the Joan of Arc building when I saw the rocket.
I saw a flash come out of the window that I was firing at, and I knew it was a rocket. So I yelled to my guys, the rocket, get down.
Also, what happens when Bob Meadows wakes up in Da Nang?
This guy running the deal there said, well, Corporal, we got one helicopter going to Hue City. That's where I want to go.
This series is reported, produced, recorded, engineered, and edited by me, Josh Rowe. A big shout out to Nicholas War for suggesting the title of this episode, Way City Grunts. That next episode will be released on November 10th as we celebrate the Marine Corps' 250th birthday. And for more special content between now and then, subscribe to my YouTube channel that is at Josh Rowe. Rowe is spelled R-O-E. Most of the information in this series has come directly from the veterans who fought and survived the Battle for Way. But I've also studied many materials to get a better understanding of the battle and the war as a whole. You can find a link to those materials in the show notes of this episode. Audio from former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in this episode, courtesy of the LBJ Presidential Library. Our series, The Battle That Changed Everything, is part of our podcast, Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of NewsChannel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join me again real soon.
Basketball game? Crushed it, and the day's just getting started. Now, kicking it with my crew. When I need a quick snack, Go-Go Squeeze Active Fruit Blend with electrolytes pouches are always in the starting lineup. Made with real fruit and select electrolytes. And so tasty. From workouts to hangouts to whatever's next, I go with Go-Go Squeeze Active. Snag yours on your next store run. Available on Amazon.